Some stories sound too real to ignore and too terrifying to forget. In this chilling collection, 3 first-hand encounters unravel in eerie silence and dark corners of the world most people never notice. A quiet town, a roadside stop, a desert fence line, all hiding something sinister just beneath the surface. If you are new to this channel and enjoy scary true stories like these, please help this channel grow by subscribing and turning on notifications. Every subscription helps us bring you more real horror stories that keep you up at night. Don't just listen, be part of the darkness. Thank you for your support. This happened when I was in 8th grade, living with my mom in a quiet, older suburb of Indianapolis. Our house was one of those modest post-war ranch styles, built in the late 1950s, low to the ground, brick exterior, and a basement that stretched under the whole house. Nothing fancy, but it had a certain warmth to it. Most of the houses on our street were occupied by retirees or single parents, and it was the kind of neighborhood where people waved when they passed, but no one really knew each other. It was just my mom and me back then. She worked long shifts at a hospital, usually gone from early morning to well into the night. I was what you'd call a latchkey kid. After school, I'd walk home, let myself in, and spend the evening alone until she got back. It wasn't so bad, plenty of snacks, cable TV, and a house to myself. But even with all that freedom, I always hated the basement. Our basement had these narrow horizontal windows that sat just above ground level. From outside, you could crouch and peek inside easily, and from the inside, you'd see people's ankles if they were standing by the wall. The windows let in the kind of light that always looked gray, no matter the weather. They were partially covered by shrubs too, which made them even darker and creepier. But what really got to me was how silent it was down there. No matter how loud the storm, how heavy the rain or wind, once you went down into the basement, the world seemed to mute itself. Mom used the basement for laundry and storage, and I rarely had any reason to go down there. But that week, the light in the hallway blew out, and our fuse box, of course, was in the basement. So that meant, for the first time in ages, I had to go down there by myself. It started on a Tuesday night. I remember the hallway going completely black when I tried flipping the switch. I assumed it was the bulb until I noticed my room's power was also out. That's when I remembered the fuse box. So I grabbed a flashlight, headed for the basement door, and took a deep breath. The air down there was always a little colder, but that night it felt different. It smelled mustier, heavier, like old, wet concrete. The flashlight flickered slightly as I stepped onto the first stair. I told myself I was being dramatic, but that didn't stop me from walking faster. I found the fuse box, flipped the necessary switches, and everything powered back on. Easy. But as I turned to leave, I thought I heard something. A shuffle, very faint. I paused, waited. Nothing. Probably just the water heater or the old dryer creaking. Still, I bolted up the stairs like a scared cat, slamming the door behind me. The next night, it happened again. Different room, same result. Power out. This time, it was the kitchen. Another trip to the basement. I was already spooked from the night before, but I didn't have a choice. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, I saw something that stopped me cold. The tiny basement window on the far wall had smudges on it, not from the inside, from the outside. Fingerprints, long streaks, almost like someone had been dragging their fingers across the glass. I walked over slowly. The flashlight beam shook as I held it up. The prints were definitely on the outside, but how? That window faced the side of the house, hidden by overgrown bushes. No one ever went back there. I would have heard them crunching through the leaves, at least. Still, I convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe a squirrel, maybe a neighbor's kid, messing around. I flipped the fuse and got out of there as fast as I could. I didn't sleep well that night. Thursday was the first time I saw the eyes. It had been pouring all day. My mom had called earlier to let me know she'd be stuck at the hospital because of flooding. So another night alone. The power went out again around 9 p.m. and I was so used to it at that point that I didn't even hesitate. I grabbed the flashlight, trudged downstairs, and headed straight for the fuse box. I didn't notice anything off until I heard a soft tapping. It wasn't loud, just rhythmic. I turned toward the sound, and my heart stopped. There, in the narrow window above the dryer, were two eyes. They weren't animal eyes. They were human, wide, open, unblinking, and way too close to the glass. I couldn't make out the rest of the face, just the eyes and the bridge of a nose. Whoever, or whatever it was, they were crouched perfectly still, peering in through that tiny slit of a window. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I just stared, and those eyes stared back. Then slowly, they disappeared. They didn't dart away or duck. Suddenly, they just sank out of view, like someone melting into the ground. I didn't remember running, but the next thing I knew, I was in the living room, slamming the front door's deadbolt shut. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I went around the outside of the house, trying to rationalize what I'd seen. I figured maybe it was just some neighbor or homeless guy who'd gotten too curious. But when I got to the side of the house, I saw it again. Footprints, bare ones, in the muddy patch below the window. They weren't normal footprints either. The toes looked long, spread out unnaturally, like they'd been stretched, and they weren't going toward the window. They were facing away, as if someone had been squatting there, watching. For a while, I told my mom everything that night. She didn't brush me off. She was scared too. We called the police. They came out, took a look, filed a report, and told us it was probably a vagrant. Happens more than you'd think, one of them said. But I could tell he didn't really believe that. Not with the footprints, not with how precise everything had been. We got new locks installed, and Mom had motion lights put in the backyard. But that wasn't the end. The final night I ever saw it, or him, or whatever it was, came 3 days later. I had convinced myself I was safe again, that it was just some freak event, maybe someone on drugs, maybe a break-in attempt that failed. I let my guard down. That night, the power didn't go out, but I woke up at 3 a.m. to a sound I hadn't heard before, tapping on the glass, not downstairs. It was my bedroom window. I sat up in bed, my heart already racing. My curtains were drawn. I didn't want to open them. I couldn't. I lay back down, hoping it would stop, trying to convince myself it was rain or a branch. The tapping stopped, and then I heard a whisper right outside the window, a voice so quiet I could barely make out the words, but I did hear one phrase over and over again. Come back down, come back down. I don't know how long it went on. I pulled the blanket over my head and stayed like that until the sun rose. When I finally found the courage to look, there was nothing there, just condensation on the glass and a faint, smeared handprint. We moved out 2 weeks later. The house sat empty for almost a year before someone else bought it. My mom never spoke about it again, but I still remember. I'll always remember, because the thing that haunts me most isn't the eyes, or the prints, or even the whispering. It's that it knew where I was, and it wanted me to come back down. I used to take long road trips a lot. Something about the solitude of driving just helped me clear my head. I'm a freelance graphic designer, so I could work from anywhere, and I'd often pack up my laptop and hit the road for a few days at a time, especially when life got too noisy. This story happened a few years ago, and I've never really talked about it in detail, not because I'm scared to, but because people just wouldn't believe me. I've even tried convincing myself that I misunderstood what I saw that night, but deep down, I know what happened, and I can't forget it. I was driving through western Arizona, heading from Sedona to San Diego. It was late, probably around 1 a.m., and I'd been on the road for hours. My eyes were getting heavy, and I knew I needed to pull over and rest. There aren't a lot of towns along that stretch, so I ended up stopping at one of those remote highway rest areas. You've seen them before, just a parking lot, a couple of vending machines, and some public bathrooms lit by yellowing overhead lights. There were only 2 other vehicles parked, a semi-truck idling near the entrance, and an old beat-up SUV parked crookedly near the far edge. I pulled into a spot as close to the building as I could, and killed the engine. The place was quiet, too quiet. No hum of insects, no wind rustling the desert brush, just the low rumble from the semi in the distance. I decided to use the restroom before settling into the back seat for a nap. I locked all my doors, except the driver's side, grabbed my flashlight, and made my way to the building. The bathroom smelled like bleach, and something else I couldn't quite place, something metallic. There was no one else inside, but a single stall door was closed. I did my business quickly, trying not to think about the creepy flickering light above the sink. On my way out, I paused, debating whether to knock on the stall door or just get out of there. I told myself it was probably just a trucker sleeping, or someone else who needed a break like me. I left without saying a word. Back in the car, I laid my seat back and closed my eyes. But I couldn't sleep. Something was gnawing at me. That SUV hadn't been there when I passed the last stretch of road. I was sure of it. And the way it was parked, slanted and slightly off the pavement, just didn't sit right. I sat up and looked around. The semi was gone. That struck me as odd, because I never heard it leave. The SUV was still there, but now the driver's door was ajar. I reached into the glove box for my knife. Nothing fancy, just a decent folding blade I kept for emergencies. I also had pepper spray on my keychain, which I kept in my lap. About 10 minutes passed. I figured maybe I was being paranoid, but then I noticed movement in my rearview mirror. A silhouette, walking slowly past the restroom building. It was a man, tall, thin, wearing a hooded jacket. He wasn't walking toward the bathroom. He was walking toward the parking lot, toward me. I sank lower in my seat, hoping he wouldn't see me. He passed my car, but didn't look in. He kept going, until he reached the SUV. I watched him circle the vehicle once, then lean in and close the driver's door gently. Then he just stood there, not moving, not walking, just standing next to the car, staring out across the desert. I was still trying to figure out what he was doing, when he suddenly turned and started walking back, toward my car. This time, I panicked, slid down onto the floor, and held my breath. I could hear footsteps crunching on the gravel. Then he stopped, right outside my door. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. I just gripped the knife and the pepper spray and waited. He didn't knock, didn't try the handle. Instead, he crouched down, and I could just barely make out the sound of his breathing, slow and steady. Then a whisper, so quiet, I almost didn't catch it. "You awake in there?" I froze. My heart was pounding so hard I thought he'd hear it. He whispered again, this time slower. "I saw you come in." I still didn't move. I didn't know if I should scream or try to drive off. But then I heard a click. Not the car door, not a weapon, a camera. He took a picture. A flash went off, small but noticeable. He was photographing my car. Then, as quietly as he came, I heard him stand up and walk away. I waited a full 10 minutes before moving. I peered out the window. He was gone. The SUV was still there, but he wasn't near it. I didn't wait to find out where he'd gone. I turned the key, locked the door, and peeled out of that rest stop so fast, I nearly lost control of the wheel. I drove straight to the next gas station I could find and parked under the lights near a busy trucker diner. I stayed there until the sun came up. The next morning, curiosity got the better of me. I drove back to the rest stop. It was empty. The SUV was gone, but I noticed something on the ground near where I had parked. A Polaroid photo. I picked it up, hesitating for a second. It was a picture of my car, taken at night, from outside the driver's side window, and inside you could see me, laying back in my seat with my eyes closed. I never saw him take that photo. I never told the police because what was I going to say? That some guy took a picture of me and whispered through the window. It wasn't illegal. Creepy as hell, sure, but not illegal. But what really haunts me is the thought that maybe that first photo, the one I heard him take, wasn't the first one. I've changed a lot since then. I don't stop at rest areas anymore, especially not at night. I always book a motel, or at least pull into a truck stop with people around. But no matter how far I drive, or how long it's been, I can't shake the feeling that somewhere, someone still has a picture of me, asleep in that car. And they were close enough to touch me, close enough to do anything, but they didn't. And somehow, that's the part that scares me the most. I grew up in a small desert town in Nevada, the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and nothing ever really changes. It's quiet, sometimes too quiet, and while most people would call that peaceful, I always found it a little unsettling, like the calm before a storm that never quite hits, but always feels like it could. I was 22 when this happened, living in a cheap little rental house on the edge of town. My roommate Derek and I had known each other since high school. We weren't best friends or anything, but we got along well enough to split rent and keep to ourselves. The house backed up against a wide stretch of desert, with nothing but a barbed wire fence separating our property from miles of open land. No one ever really went out there. You could walk for hours and not see another soul. One night in late October, I was home alone. Derek had taken off for a weekend trip to Reno with some friends. I had the house to myself, which normally would have been great. Binge some horror movies, make a frozen pizza, maybe even sleep in the living room. That was the plan. Anyway, it started around 11:30 p.m. I was just finishing up the last movie of the night, an old slasher flick, when I heard what sounded like a dull thud against the back wall of the house. I paused the movie, sat up, and waited. Nothing. I figured maybe a stray jackrabbit had run into the siding. It wasn't uncommon out here. I pressed play again, but a few minutes later, I heard it again, this time louder, more deliberate, like someone hitting the wall with their palm. I muted the TV and walked over to the sliding glass door that looked out onto our backyard. The motion light hadn't gone off, and everything looked the same. Our old fire pit, 2 lawn chairs, the sagging fence at the back of the yard. I stared for a minute, scanned the edges of the property, and didn't see anything. I told myself it was nothing, and went to brush my teeth, but just as I was finishing up, I heard it again, except now it was coming from the side of the house, a dragging sound, slow and gritty, like something being pulled across gravel. I turned off the bathroom light, crept toward the kitchen window that faced the side yard, and looked out. There was someone standing just beyond the motion light's reach. At first I couldn't make out any details. He was completely still, no flashlight, no phone light, just standing there in the shadows. I thought maybe it was one of the neighborhood kids messing around, but there was something wrong about how still he was. I squinted, trying to focus. Then he moved, not toward the house, but closer to the fence. I backed away from the window, and immediately locked the side door. I started going around the house, locking everything, checking every window, making sure all the blinds were shut. I tried calling Derek. No answer. I didn't want to call 911, because technically, nothing had happened yet. I told myself, maybe it was a hiker who got lost, or someone passing through on foot. That's what I told myself. I decided to sleep with the lights on. I locked myself in my bedroom and sat on my bed, scrolling through my phone to try and distract myself. But around 1 a.m., I heard something new, a tapping on my bedroom window. My stomach dropped. I didn't want to look. I froze, staring at the wall across from the window, hoping it would stop, but it didn't. It got louder, more insistent. I finally worked up the nerve to pull the curtain back just an inch. He was standing right there. His face was inches from the glass, pale, weathered skin, sunken eyes. He didn't look drunk or strung out. He looked focused, like he was waiting for something. Then, as I was staring in disbelief, he grinned and held up something in his hand. It was a rusted metal hook. I fell backward onto the floor and crawled away from the window. I grabbed my phone again, this time calling 911 without hesitation. The dispatcher kept me on the line while I moved to the closet and shut myself in. I don't even remember what I said. I just kept whispering that there was someone outside, and I didn't know what he wanted. The tapping stopped before the police arrived. When they got there, he was gone. They checked the whole property and found footprints around the windows and a small pile of rocks stacked neatly against the back fence. The officer said it looked like someone had been watching the house from the other side for a while. They filed a report and told me to stay somewhere else for the night, just in case. I went to my friend Eli's place across town. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that face in the window. The next day, I went back to the house with Derek. We walked the backyard and followed the footprints over the fence and into the open desert. About 100 yards out, we found something half buried in the sand, an old folding chair, a couple of crumpled water bottles, and dozens of cigarette butts. He'd been living out there, watching us, for who knows how long. We never saw him again. The cops didn't find any ID, and they never got any more calls about a guy matching his description. But every so often, I wake up in the middle of the night and swear I hear tapping again. I haven't opened my bedroom blinds since.